For innovators, maybe you remind, for past 3 days, and actually many innovators got, I think, inspirations during the festival. Ars Electronica is I would say, perfect environment to envision for the future. So the FIS is functioned as a think tank, even during the festival. So we didn't show any, final pieces, but rather through the festival, innovators observes some, new hints for the future. So today, in this final presentation, what we are showing you is outcomes, from innovators all over the world. 24 innovators all over the world gathered here. Then what they tackled together was those topics: future humanity, future dignity, and future sharing. As I said, once again, today, what you are observing and also getting is questions. It's quite unique, isn't it? So FIS is creating creative questions. So I would like to again introduce Kazuko. So for telling audience about initial questions and also the process of FIS a little bit.
Yes, we are here not just to look at just the solutions or the answers, but we are questioning future questions, creative questions that envision the future, our more possibilities, or even our challenges and our missions. And through these 3 days, we, with the lovely innovators, we were very mentored, and we had great mentors with us that gave us inspirations. And this environment, of course, is very inspirational. Before, they were called up by open calls and through these actual themes. So future humanity, they had an initial three initial questions, which is now generated into creative questions, which we will ask for the presentation shortly. Going over which questions, I'd like to ask the audience for you also to think of what you would answer to these questions. What errors are we attracted to and why? Why are people attracted to errors, or are you attracted to errors? How can we coexist with imperfections? How can we become more human? And future dignity. How would dignity be created in the digital society? What is tradition in an unpredictable future? How might arts of imperfection enhance our future dignity? And the last theme was future sharing. And what errors could occur in the future shared society? What would humans need to share, and how? How would it be realized? And lastly, how can we arrange for tolerance of errors in society? Some of the questions actually were derived from past Future Innovators Summit. We had a Future Innovators Summit in Tokyo, which also inspired the team to come up with these questions. So it's a cycle of questions that are generated in the future. So before going into the presentations, I'd like to ask our facilitators, introduce my facilitators. Facilitators, please come up. So if you tell us your name, which theme, and then the background of yourself, maybe in order of the presentation.
So I was facilitator for Team A, and I'm Fran Miller, and this is my 4th year facilitating with FIS. And every year it's really, really exciting. You really don't know what happens at the end, but I think that's what makes FIS and everything just so exciting. So yeah, that was fun, and that's Team A.
I'm Naho from the Future Humanity Team B, and this is the really first FIS athletes for me. Actually, I was in the FIS Tokyo as the first sub-facilitator, but this time the experience was really impressive, and so except for me, I really like to appreciate all of our team members, and I'm looking really forward to your super presentation.
Hi,
Balzac. I was facilitator for the group Future Dignity, and we had amazing conversations. Very fortunate to have been able to guide the team and lead them through a process that resulted in quite a different outcome that we expected. My background is urban experience design, and I work with elderlies to come up with a cross-generational way of how to connect generations within families. So I had a very close connection to our group, and we look super forward to telling you our question and our little video that we had a lot of fun preparing today.
Stefan Minsky. I'm working with wearing a few hats. I worked with the Ars Electronica Futurelab for many years with my great colleague Hideaki Igawa, who has helped me very much to understand a new kind of value system around rethinking art, very much as well as some of my other colleagues. So I've been working with the Future Sharing group, a great bunch of guys. I've had so much fun. It's been a really good experience. I'm not going to say much about what we were doing because I also don't know what the final outcome is going to be. But the question that we arrived to yesterday was something that I was certainly very happy with and very proud about. And I guess I would only just say that some other hats I wear, I'm establishing an organism, you could say, in Australia called Ars Electronica Australia, which we don't know where it's going, but it's kind of growing. But we are very sort of influenced and motivated by this idea of art thinking, and in particular the programs that you guys are running in Japan. And also finally I do a PhD on the topic of collaboration in experimental art, and I use this sort of differentiation between art thinking and design thinking as a way to understand new kind of models for how we kind of work together, what's different from cooperating and coordinating. And I think there's something really interesting happening in this space between the art thinking and the design thinking, and together with the team from Hakuhodo and Hideaki, now for a few years working with the FIS has helped us kind of come up with, I think, something which is a very exciting new tool, and one that, I know is about to be rolled out in several other countries, not only just in Japan. So thanks for coming, and thanks for keeping me part of it.
So, I think we'd like to jump into the presentations. So I would like to ask Fran to introduce your innovators.
Okay, so if the members from Team A can come up. So first there's Marcus, and there's Lizzie, Snow, Youngjun, Georgie, and Christoph.
So this is the group Future Humanity A. So who are we to have any kind of prediction or vision for the future of humanity? We're just a couple of people from different backgrounds, be it science, communication, art, design, music, science, and so on. So I think this is quite a huge task, and it's also, to a certain extent, involves a lot of responsibility, and we believe that we can, if at all, can see ourselves as kind of humble visionaries, that we're quite, there's great humility in this task. When you do kind of future outlook, it turns out that it might say more about the present than it does about the future. And you can see that if you look to the past and see predictions from the 1950s of how they saw the future. And I remember very vividly a picture where you saw a woman and her child with her car saying hello to dad, who was going to the rocket to fly to work. And everything was actually the same in the future. The only thing that changed was that the car was replaced by the rocket, but the woman was still at home with the kid. So there are other changes that go very well beyond technology, so there's several different layers where change can take place. So I think what we try to do is to identify a question that could stand the test of time. So the same question could be asked again in 20 and 40 years. So it's kind of a timeless question that has to be renewed and repeated and challenged and tackled all the time. And that's what we try to do. We can't give an answer, but the thing that we can do is to hopefully try to have a great question that keeps you busy for the coming years. And with that, I'd like to start a short mood video that introduces our question, so you get kind of the basic idea of what we would like to do.
Okay, so the video shows some of the keywords that we have been exploring, and now we'd like to task you guys with 2 questions to make you further think about these ideas. So they're going to be 2 yes and no questions, and you can interpret them in whatever way you want. Oh, okay. Okay, I'm just repeat the questions. So how can we optimize diversity to navigate the future? And back to the 2 questions I'm going to ask you guys. So they're going to be 2 yes and no questions. And you can interpret it in whatever way you prefer. But the key is to answer them fast in 5 seconds. And also you have to decide between yes and no. So everyone has to do it. So to answer yes, you raise your hand like this and spread the no like a fish star. Like this. And no is like this, so like a rock. Cool, everyone get it? Yeah, so are you ready? Okay, so the first question is, are you diverse enough to be resilient?
Everyone's really fast, we don't have to do the countdown. Let's do 3, 2, 1, decide. Alright, I'm going to come and pick on someone. No, keep your hands in the air. I'm going to come and pick on someone. You have to tell me why you decided yes or no. I'm going to pick on Future Humanity B. Okay, so why did you decide yes?
Because I work in a jail and I'm an artist, so I feel pretty diverse.
So what did you interpret as resilient?
That I'm alive and functional today.
Did anyone say no? Okay, sorry, I'm just going to do here because it's close enough. So why did you decide no?
Reality.
And how did you interpret the question?
Well, to tell the truth, I'm not sure how resilient all of us are at the moment. So I had to put the doubt out there because I saw how many optimistic people I have around me.
So it's super interesting that people are starting to interpret, you know, these words, these one words, and how they interpret society in different ways. So it moves on to our second question.
So the second question is, do you think we need to improve our diversity? I'm going to count down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, raise your hand and decide.
I'm going to come and pick on this side. Do you mind if I ask you? So you said yes. Why do you think yes?
Diversity. The more diversity, the more resilience, the more we can adapt to what's around us.
And how did you interpret diversity?
Different abilities.
Thank you. Did anyone else, hang on, did anyone say no? Interesting. Okay, I'm going to pick on someone else that said yes then. Is there anyone, maybe one of our other teammates here? Did you say yes? Yeah?
Well, everybody said yes. I think that, yeah, I think that there's at the moment, if we think of the diversity, we still somehow are stuck to some topics and leave others out of our mind. And I think there are many other areas where we could think about more diversity, especially when it comes to ways of thinking and interpreting the world. And I think, every form of diversity helps us to understand the world better and then, come to a better future.
Thank you very much. So the reason we did this is we thought we were on a journey, and we spent a lot of time the last couple of days debating specific language, kind of asking questions of those questions that we went on. But it took all of us together to come up with this one line, and we interpreted it in completely different ways. I kind of like that we all read something very, very different into that. And you could hear when I asked the questions of everyone, they started off by going, well, or something of that description. So I think that is really indicative of the journey that we went on, and that we would like to encourage other people to go on. And at the heart of that is the word diversity, and it takes all of us together and all of you together to kind of try and tackle that. And also we're going to navigate together. It's going to be a journey. It's not going to be easy, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
So, does anyone have any questions? Comments?
Thanks. It was a very, very nice interactive thing that you did. I just want to comment. I did a course on diversity at my university, and with about 30 or 40 students. And it was very interesting that very few people know what diversity is. And my students didn't know what is diversity. And there's one interesting thing that the UNESCO did was to equate ecological diversity with cultural diversity. And this was something which was not taken up too well by many communities. So cultural diversity is something which is completely different than ecological diversity, but there is a very, very interesting connection. And I think we have to first understand what is diversity.
That's a very good point. Does anybody want to elaborate on that?
And so we purposely left the word there as a kind of nebulous thing, because each of us look at that in a really different way, and it's something we kind of really thought through about kind of what words could kind of be encompassed in that, so whether it's variation, whether it is imperfection, like, and all of those kind of things beneath it. But one of the questions that we thought about asking you when we did this challenge is, do we understand diversity? So it's interesting that you bring that up as a point. And I think there's different, depending on the context, how people interpret that and how their level of understanding will change. So I think it is dependent on the environment as well. So it's purposely there. Our previous iteration of this question, we really debated the use of every single word, and so we kind of like the ambiguity within that, so that people can kind of question each part of our question as well as like it as a whole. I don't know whether you want to.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's true that the cultural diversity has very different kind of set of rules and constraints than ecological diversity. But I think there is no clear-cut border. It depends. Different cultures have different practices, so they also exchange bacteria, for example, and the microbiome might also be affected by the way cultural diversity takes place. So there is an interaction, and it's if you look at it from a systemic, holistic perspective, I think at a certain level, it's necessary to encompass these both and many more other types of diversities. Actually, there are even diversities, but we didn't want to overload the question here with this thing. So diversity is certainly necessary on different layers and different strata in order to be resilient and to navigate the future.
So I wonder if the group could address, I understand the idea of diversity. Let's sort of do the opposite. Are there inalienable human rights where there's a point where diversity you say, no, that's not acceptable, we do not accept that form of diversity?
I mean, we use the word optimize and not maximize, this is probably a question that comes out of the question we asked here. What is there kind of a minimum set of diversity? What is kind of an optimal? What diversity is too much? I mean, if every one of us speaks a different language, there's no way we can communicate. So there has to be kind of a balance between things we can share and things we have not in common in order to have kind of a productive and meaningful interaction. But I guess it's a very good point, and could very well come out of this question as well.
So, as Marcus said, optimization doesn't come up at one shot. So we might need some experiment. So, I think what you might worry about is when some new things come up, like there might be seen as some alien specific characteristics. So I think what's important is we should appreciate those kind of experiments that what might help the optimization, I guess.
So the next presentation is from our dear Future Humanity Team B. So please come up to the stage, members.
We're Future Humanity B, which is not a second-rate version of humanity. We're the dark side of humanity. They're A human, we're B human. I don't know, there's a lot of puns we can play, but we're another take on humanity, which I think is the main thing. I just want to introduce the B humans, Sa, Ilya, Omar, Cho, Magda, and our illustrious leader, Naho. And Matt, who we kind of had to get rid of because he wasn't human enough. Oh, Future Humanity B. Now Matt has flown out with his wonderful human B as well. So we're going to do a few things this afternoon, but the first thing I want to do is we're going to do a very simple social game. And it's always risky, but if it's Sunday afternoon, we need to move around a little bit. We're in Austria, in the middle of Europe. Let's have a bit of fun. We need to form 3 rows. So if you don't want to participate, don't come towards the front, but this is the future and you want to be part of it. So I strongly encourage everyone to stand up and move into 3 rows. So we can keep this first row, and then if we can fill the second and third row.
Stand in the row.
Okay, so this is row 1. Okay, row 2 behind. Okay, terrific. What we're going to do is, there's 3 initiators, Magda, Cho, and myself. We're going to give you guys a message. It's a form of, I think in Europe they call it telephone, if you guys know telephone. Very simple game. We're going to give you a message. The first person on this side will get the message. And your role, and your only role, is to try and pass on that message as perfectly as you can to the person next to you. So, obviously, just for the person next to you, and we're going to see, we're going to meet you on the other side and see how the message has arrived. So is everyone cool with that? We know what we're doing? Telephone, which is a very ancient kind of technology when we talk about 2018, but we're doing it with 3 human beings. Okay, let's do it. All right, we're ready. Okay, so Cho, could you repeat as perfectly as you can what you heard? Maybe you want to press it.
So, as perfect word as look like.
Whatever you heard, that's it. There's no right or wrong, but we are taking notes.
If we combine the perfect, if we combine the work and art, what would the work look like?
Okay, and from the third row, it was if we could create the best communication, what would that be? Okay, so we're not revealing what the actual initial question was at the moment, But what I would say is one thing we did, thank you, everyone can sit down, and round of applause. You guys have now all performed at Ars Electronica, so you can put that on your CVs, and you can be very happy. So, we're not going to reveal what the question was until the end, but the one thing I'll say is we delivered the first input. It was the same question, but we delivered in 3 different ways. So Cho changed the tempo and made it very slow. I don't know exactly how slow, but I know it was a lot slower. Magda did it at normal rate, that was the kind of the control. And I actually sang the question. So somewhere along the line, the melody got lost. There was no melody. I thought the melody would change, you know, as songs develop and change. But somehow it fizzled out, which is fine. So now I'm going to pass it over to Sarah and Ilya, who are going to tell you guys more about where we came from and where we got to with this whole question of future humanity being. Over to you guys.
So, we wanted to give you not only the final creative question we came up with, but also a glimpse into the process and into the ideas and questions that echoed through us all the way to this question. Some of them connected, some of them disconnected, and then connected again, and some of them here behind me. So we started with death. Our mentor was Kilian, which is a humanitarian, worked for many years in refugee camps and in war-torn places, and with the most horrible situations you can imagine. So he gave us some images of death, or smell of corpses, of solving great problems within refugee camps. And with that also left us with the question, how can we listen to those communities to find out what they really need and answer those needs and not our imaginary needs for them. So maybe it won't surprise us so much if we started with these images, that one notion and concept that we came to again and again was perspective. And the perspective has also a deep connection into error. An error in one perspective can look completely different in another. So how can we think of processes and technologies, for example, in scopes of years, decades, centuries, way beyond our mortal lives, and yet keep our perspective of now, of survival? How can these perspectives not simply overwhelm us? Another idea, these perspectives also connect us to another concept, something which relates to art and is a maybe uniquely human experience, which is a sense of wonder, transition between different perspectives that make us discover or suddenly rediscover the world. Which leads us also to the question, can robots have a sense of wonder?
So many of us associate this idea of becoming more reliant on computer technology with the possibility of losing our humanity, including that sense of wonder that Sarah talked about. But I think another way that we came up to look at this was not as becoming less human, but as human plus. So there's a woman in the cyborg community who actually has some sort of apparatus embedded in her arm, which vibrates when there's an earthquake anywhere around the world. So if you think about it, this is kind of an amazing thing. It's both wonderful and terrible because this augmented sense that she has not only changes her perspective on the world, but changes her relationship or her boundaries of self and other, and increases her circle of care. And another thought that we had in conjunction with this is we now know that the bacteria in our human intestines, actually the gut biome actually influences not only human health but human psychological states. So the question is, when we extend ourselves through technology, when we say we or I, what exactly do we mean? And moreover, as we extend ourselves through technology, what parts of human do we want to save? And the final question is, why even bother being human?
Which directly takes us to the next provocative question. What part of humanity is worth saving? Or maybe in a less provocative but more precise way, what part of the human condition and the human experience is worth saving, is important for us as humans? Is there a distinction between human and post-human? Aren't we always already post-human, evolving and changing with technology? How can we, with this process of creating technology and tools, and then having been reshaped by those tools, how can we control the outcome of this shape? Not only the purpose of technology, but also the human that is being formed by this technology. We thought a lot about three concepts within the human psychology, our psychological needs: agency, efficacy, and interrelatedness. Agency, our need to have a voice and control and influence over our goals, in which we can then judge the errors. Efficacy, our ability to reach them, and interrelatedness, the connection between our common goals. What do we need, what type of control we need to lose to gain cooperation? Straight to back to you.
So we thought about the development of language and how it's intimately connected to human embodiment. And as we extend ourselves through technology, our sense of ourselves, our world, and our relationship to it will change. This means that we will necessarily change the ways we think about communication. Might we think about the changing populations of algae in the ocean as a form of communication? When we think of errors in communication, these seem inevitable. Take the word banana. Some people who are older understand the word as a quintessential kind of very sweet flavor. Apparently the original banana species that they remember is actually extinct now. And the surviving forms, as well as improvements in harvesting and transportation, have altered the taste of the banana to something much less sweet. So what might a banana taste like to a machine? A computer can repeat the word banana ad infinitum without mistake, but for humans, memory, personal experience, expectation, and emotion are all encoded in that little word. Must we all become of one mind in order to develop a perfect form of communication? Or might a perfect form be more like an orchestra with each individual instrument or group of instruments playing a message that is sometimes in harmony, sometimes in opposition, but forming a single work like a symphony? And we end with this thought, namely that the questions we choose to ask and the ones we choose to ignore will define our future. Thus, perhaps error and perfection are embedded in the questions we ask and how we ask them, rather than whether we arrive at the right answer. With that, we are going to reveal the original message, the final question.
Hello, my name is Buster. At least I think that's who I am, or maybe that's who I was. Who can really tell? It's confusing being me in this state. Future humanity, oh my. The message was, wait, let me remember. This is slightly embarrassing. Oh yes, if we could create the perfect form of communication, what would the world look like?
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your really good presentation. And we'd like to welcome some questions from the audience. So,
Someone else had a question. I really liked the part where you were talking about, I think, something close to a paper I read recently which talked about a technology as a kind of a prosthetic for the mind, like rapid prototyping. Mexican philosopher Pedro Baez, just for the reference. I'm not sure if it's published yet. But, so I think I like this idea of, like you're talking about, maybe in the relation with the communication and the thread between the human and the technology being part of that support to the perfect communication. I guess that's my question. Is that what you're first thinking of, maybe the inspiration where you would go from this question? Do you think it's something in that space? Do you think the technology is helping for that better form of communication? And you mentioned the technology on the arm, and relating back to the compass, there's the North Sense project, which is quite interesting. It just gives you a buzz when you're due north, and how much that changed. Same people, yeah, I thought it might have been. So I guess that, because you were talking a bit about that, and then maybe there's some other references I'd be interested to hear them.
Just on the first point, I mean, it was kind of amazing that that game is called Telephone, because, I think in the old days, telephones were crackly, you'd call across the Atlantic and hello, whatever. So there was a distortion, but there is something beautiful in human communication and losing something. I think we have a perfect form. In a way, machines potentially have a perfect form of communication because you can copy the exact sound file over, so you don't really have much of a loss in the message, but I think you lose something in other ways. So, like with all the questions, I think we want to provoke the notion, is there such a thing as a perfect form of communication? And even if there is that really something we're trying to attain? At some stage, I'd love to know what happened with the music, and I'd love to kind of track how the communication, because you put your own personality and biases. Maybe someone just didn't like to sing or want to sing, or someone wanted to speed up the question. The human element to communication, I think, adds a lot to it, even if it becomes more imperfect. Does anyone want to say anything?
I really like this idea of the possibility of using technology to augment our perspective in the world, or the possibilities of seeing things differently, and especially as it might relate to a sense of interrelatedness with the world. I think that right now, with global warming, we clearly have lost a sense of communication with the Earth, whatever that means. And I feel like technology, I'm really interested in the possibility of a kind of poetics of that use of technology, so that we can actually expand our sense of who we are as humans, and who we're responsible for, or what kinds of forms of communication, who should we be talking to, basically. That I find really interesting.
Well, it was also very present in our conversations, the notion of technology and the way it not only creates opportunities for communication, but it also creates noise. Again, back to the telephone. The notion of noise itself is very much present in our technologically evolving world. So that's like one part, but we also use the form of communication to emphasize that communication is not only verbal. So that's also the sensing and augmenting ourselves to have feelings of the other ways of communication that are out there, like chemical communication and all of those amazing natural also stuff. So.
Any other questions? The front? Oh. And just there's one. And then there's, yeah. No, don't. You're all equal. Some are more equal than others.
We are A. So what do you mean with perfect communication? I mean, in your example here, if for example, your song wouldn't come out in the very exact way that you have sung it, that would have been a perfect communication. Is that what you mean? Or do you mean something else with perfect communication?
Well, I think we leave it open to people put their own interpretation on it. We don't want to give that answer. We say perfect form of communication, so we don't say even who communicate between human to human, or human to nature, or human to dog. Dogs like nature. And we don't, I didn't actually specify that it even has to be words, but obviously because it's the game telephone. But I was interested maybe someone would draw it or record it on their phone and pass it over, or do an interpretive dance, which is a running joke in our group apparently. So we actually left it open, but words are obviously a very powerful form for humans to communicate. Maybe machines also communicate in a different way.
We didn't define the human as well. And I think the perfect, especially in the topic of Ars Electronica and error, is the subversive part of this question.
Thank you very much for your presentation. So my question is about how did you jump to communication is my question, because for me the idea of the agency, the interaction, and the boundaries that have you have between the me, you, and whatsoever, it always, for me, it seems that you already have that idea of self incorporated in it. So, but in the end, I think the idea of self has a lot to do with responsibility, about believing in humans' intelligence, so to say, but there are some ways of thinking that maybe communication isn't happening between you and me, but it's just a, how do you call it, like a system that evolved in some kind of coincidental state. So how do you think, how are you imagining about humanity, its responsibility of a person at a personal state, and how did that affect to your final jump in going into communication?
We had that, we talked about it actually a lot, and one of the thing is that to express your agency and express all those other things that constitute you, you need to communicate. Like you need to communicate your boundaries for them to be established in a sense. So that's how we thought that the communication is the key to all those three essential ingredients of being human, of human experience, and of human experience to be, in a sense, whole. And also we never thought that humans are communicating the best way. We were talking about consciousness and about hive minds in that aspect, and the aspect of self also came up a lot. Whether, you know, is the consciousness the perfect end to the evolution? No, we asked that question as well. I don't think there's answers. So, but yes, form, minds, etc.
I think that we are all, I mean, the boundary between self and other is, well, I mean, I don't want to go into a whole neuroscience thing, but there is an evolutionary perspective about how that developed. And it's thought that it actually started with motor interaction with the world, and that actually was the beginning form of consciousness, and defines self and other and inside and out and environment. Versus your own self. So, but I think that what's clear is that the interrelated, what's becoming more and more clear is the interrelatedness of things. So if your gut bacteria can actually determine whether you're depressed or not, what does that even mean for a self? I don't know the answer, but I do know that there are forms of communication that we're not even aware of. Like, so that gut bacteria is throwing out, you know, some kind of neurotransmitter essentially. So that's a form of communication we didn't even ask to recognize it. Like we were so arrogant as to think, why, how could a bacteria be controlling my brain? I think that with more discovery, we realized just how much hubris that was. So I don't know the answer to your question, but I do know that, I do feel that expanding at least our conception of who is worthy of communicating with us and how might the earth be communicating with us? How might animals be communicating with us? And then what is our circle? What is our responsibility? I don't have the answer, but I think that that's how it all interrelates with communication.
Just one quick thing I remember. I think someone in the group or within our larger this team asked a question, if we can communicate telepathically with each other, what language would that be in? And I sort of thought, oh, that's crazy notion, that doesn't make any sense, but you know, we are moving, there's exhibitions there of people like starting to use their brainwaves to control things, and it is fascinating if we use technology to communicate in a new way, what language, or are we bypassing language altogether? I'll pass it over to you.
Only one remark related to how did we end up with communication. So it's not. So it wasn't we didn't build an argument, we built semantic areas that connect to each other and give us questions that can pose, can negate each other and can help us rethink things. But I think that eventually the perfect form of communication, especially in the context of error, and of course we know that perfection does not exist, make us think, try to push ourselves to think what is a perfect form of communication. Not only the communication itself, but how communication forms ourselves back. And we talked. One of the things we talked about was how, in the example of enhancing ourselves and adding an extra sense, we already enhanced ourselves. If I lose my phone right now, I already feel like I lose part of my brain, and the communication through it already shaped me, and how I judge my own agency, how I judge my own efficacy. So, in a way, these forms of communication, not only we can perfect them, they can perfect us. Like we have a place within them. We're shaping ourselves into these forms of communications constantly. Yeah.
Next is dignity.
Okay, I quickly want to first introduce my group. We have Abir from Jordan, Pia from the Philippines, Moon Jong from Korea, Kevin from the US, Harald from Austria, and Michiaki from Japan. So I would like to hand over the microphone to Pia, who's going to lead through the presentation.
Hi. Hi. Let's communicate. Hi. It's 5 o'clock. All right. So I got this indignity. I'm standing. I'm the one speaking because among these 5 brilliant individuals, I'm the one throwing out the Marvel, X-Men, and Star Wars references. So like, we keep talking. So, okay, let me be serious now. So, good afternoon, fellow humans. As we know, the process of creation starts with questions. And I want to talk to all of you as humans who are creative and innovative. We're all here because we are like that. And the end of our presentation is really to help you come up with something, this future that we want, that we wish for. So ironically, thank you, organizers, is our mentor, Loser. They came up with some very hard questions to start us off on this output of giving you questions at the end of this day. They went through it quickly earlier, but just quickly, like there were 3 prompts. The first one was, what is tradition in an unpredictable future? So imagine that was the first thing that we started talking about. Not really the first, but you know, there's Star Trek. But this early on, as we started talking about it, it became quite clear that coming to an agreement between 6 very different people, coming from 6 very different traditions, would be very difficult. And as we kept digging and speaking with each other and exchanging our ideas, every answer would just turn into another question. So we kept digging and digging. And somehow we kept going back to 2 really tough questions that we actually kept skirting. Let's put that off. Let's not talk about that. And it was, what is tradition, or sorry, what is dignity, and where does it come from? And maybe corollary to that, where does it reside? There were 2 other prompts, so we had to go through those 2 other difficult conversations around how might the arts of imperfection enhance our future dignity, and how would dignity be created in a digital society. So what we took out of these, actually the verbs were the interesting things, like enhancing and creation in the aspect of it, relating that to dignity. The verbs were interesting because there were a lot of assumptions we felt that were baked in. And those are assumptions that would only come out when you have this group of 6 very different individuals. And so we started unpacking those assumptions, and we started to see, well, at some point we had to make a decision. You know, this is about distillation. Let's distill, let's get to the very bottom of things. So it required a lot of patience and understanding for my bad jokes. So there is a lot of going around, actually, different, like the lady mentioned, self, borders, agency. We definitely talked about that. Definitely relevant when you're talking about dignity, right? There were thoughts around ownership and privacy, social transactions, the social fabric, valuation of dignity, ensuring a path to thrive for all. So like the social activists and social entrepreneurs were coming out. Being, you know, with a big B, self with a big S, and the importance of empathy, education, communication, critical thinking, and we were testing all our assumptions, all our questions with special populations. Does this apply to, say, digital personas that were created in the virtual world? Does this apply even to refugees? Does this apply to dogs, your pet dog? So always testing and challenging each other. Anyway, the distillation demanded each of us to basically go into the deepest things we each valued when we all speak of human dignity together. So finally, 3 things emerged. And basically, they are 3 wishes that we all had and shared. So those are the 3 things that are baked into the question that we are now, well, in a bit, we are going to share with you. We have 3 wishes for this future of dignity that we are going to be asking you to create. First, it was important to us all to have dignity for all in a post-human world. So it might be because of all the Star Trek stuff, but we also included thoughts around AIs that do have a sense of self, for example, or transhumans. So how do you define dignity if it's not anthropocentric, if it's not about you or us the way we define it now? The second wish is a dignified state that allows each other to flourish. And it's kind of obvious. And the third is a place for tradition, heritage, and culture in the future. So all those 3 things, those 3 wishes, we distilled into the questions that you're about to see. And that's it, actually. So the video you're about to see has 3 prompts, kind of like how the organizers started us out, kind of like smaller questions that lead to our final question, the supposedly biggest question. And even if you listen closely, a little rationale there on why we chose this question in particular. So,
I'll now be going into this voting booth, which is supposed to tell me what I might vote, but I think that's pretty obvious.
Smile to Vote confronts us with the implications for political processes, as well as for our understanding of self-determination and freedom of will.
So what is your result? It's the homage. You know, AI knows nothing. Do I look like a rightist?
So you should press in the middle of the page here in the program with fingers or...
So this is the book, A Tactile Thought Diary for Meditation and Self-Reflection. It listens to your body and guides you to calmness. So what Moon did was place her hand on the cover. It lit up as it detected her stress level. And now we're waiting for a quote to come out that would tell us what her state is, how calm she is, and what needs to be said for her to get to a calm state again.
Actually, when I started, I feel really nervous because, you know, what results will come. But when I see the sentence, the cloud, it's really poetic. It was a very strange moment. I like it. Yeah.
Yesterday we went to the Futuristico Fantasticos concert, and it was very different and very unusual.
Yeah, I didn't expect that, like, that really exciting night.
Simply by using just old objects and CCTVs and the fan and turning it into music.
You know, so that it's still using the technologies and then making a totally different context to connect with a human. But AI couldn't even imagine about that.
It was totally new because they played on so many different notions of nostalgia, of memory, and they brought in their own kind of emotions into this whole performance.
Yes, it's so humane, you know, that's so human beings' self-determination to use those instruments to let people excited. So AI can make a perfect music, but it can never make such a crazy night.
My fellow teammates on stage just for a super short Q&A session, please. Any questions in the audience?
That's one question. Yesterday when I was walking towards the city, I ran into two students. They were 18, just starting art school in Holland. And what surprised me tremendously was, so I was saying, and they're visiting the Ars Festival, so I was saying, so what do you think about all this AI business and AI machines creating music and all of that? And they said they're totally not interested in all of this. And they think that music needs authorship. And when we listen to music, like when you went to the concert yesterday, you connected yourself with the people who were doing it. It wasn't the machines, it wasn't the fans, it was the people who were taking the fans doing it. So do you think that, I mean, all this AI thing that's transforming everything, that it would actually create a counter movement, which would make us go back to something even older than, I don't know, electronic music? Maybe we would bring the violin and the piano again. Do you think so?
I mean, this is something that we also discussed yesterday by saying that the emergence of, let's say, you know, the Trumps and the Bushes, if you want to call them as just an example, or other kind of bad movements, or, you know, are really necessary in order to create the counter movements. And we actually start seeing that, for example, with Instagram, you have this movement that's going on with, or this ideal that has been created about beauty. However, where people are basically feeling the pressure of having to, on one hand, maintain a certain sense of beauty and of a certain image, but on the other hand, we asserted that there is a counter movement happening because of that, that is saying that no, it's okay to be imperfect, it's okay to be overweight, or it's okay to have wrinkles on your face. So I think on that premise, there is always kind of a yin and a yang situation. And there are always counter movements emerging out of you know, things like what you basically described.
Just to, well, freedom of self-determination, that's exactly, the counter movements are exactly the product that we hope to have. Like, these are the multiple futures that are allowed because there's a room for error, essentially, right? Because what we wanted to ground our question, because the question of like freedom of self-determination, it already occurs when we talk about human dignity. But especially within the context of almost deterministic data in science, like when you, Harold kept talking about the tension between following what is believed to be better knowledge. Like my Fitbit keeps telling me to run, and I don't want to, but I suck. But I should be allowed that freedom all the time. And that's the question. The intent of the question is to allow for countercultures, or countercultures even.
You know, in addition to your thought about freedom, I also think about purpose, about what role someone or something has, and to what extent that's a central value in this question of dignity and art. I think about when photography was invented and it created this crisis in painting, because painting is like, oh, do we need painting anymore? Because now these photographs, they capture reality much more accurately than a human with a brush, but it ended up liberating painting to explore alternative methods of representation, to explore abstract qualities, to explore concepts. So it just actually led to a flourishing by reinventing, redefining its purpose. It no longer had to care about representation anymore. So I think about, if AI is going to be able to compose a certain kind of music that is quote unquote perfect, could that liberate humans from having to perform certain kinds of perfect music and rediscover new kinds, or discover new kinds of music through imperfection? And so I think that might be an impulse that the young people that you talk to just sort of instinctively have. It's like, this music, this AI music, it doesn't give me any purpose, but maybe forced to confront it, they'll have to find another purpose.
I think I'd like to add that many questions arise out of this whole discussion. Is, for example, is human dignity a universal concept? Is it the property of individuals or the property of communities? But I think one essential revelation for us all was that dignity is not an end; it's a process of growth and of discovering oneself. And I think this is how it relates to this whole idea of self-determination, and as a way to kind of assert our individuality and our uniqueness with ourselves and with our communities. And I think I like that idea of it being a process of growth, and to think about dignity not as a static thing, but as something that you have to kind of work towards always and reassess and reflect on continuously.
Okay, without any further delay, I would like to welcome the Future Sharing group up to have Sandra from Germany, Nicholas also from Germany, Cynthia who's US but also spends a lot of time in China, and Jennifer who's also from the US but also Thailand, where she's currently based. And also Song, who I found out has the nickname Coming Soon, which I think is really appropriate for what you guys are about to show. And again from South Korea, so thanks for the good times and good luck with your presentation.
I just want to welcome you to the Sonic Soup. Hi, we are Future Sharing, and I'd like to start off this presentation with a little story. So one night, a long time ago, a drifter wanders into a village. He's so hungry, they're living in a famine, and he hasn't eaten in 3 days. He goes to this village, goes to each and every house, asking for a little bit of food, and each and every house turns him away empty-handed. No matter, he goes to the center of the village and starts putting a pot on the boil. The villagers all crowd around him asking, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well, we're all hungry, I'm gonna make a stone soup." They ask, "How do you do that?" He goes around and collects big round stones, brushes them off, and plops them into the water. He tries the soup and exclaims, "This is so delicious, this is good, I really outdone myself. But one thing that would make it a little better, some carrots." A villager exclaims, "I have carrots," runs back to his house, plops the carrots in the pot, and the drifter tries the soup again. "Oh my gosh, this is so much better. But you know what? I think it's missing a little bit of potatoes." Another villager exclaims, "I have potatoes," goes to their house, gets potatoes and puts in the pot. And pretty soon, every villager goes back to their house and contributes one thing to the stone soup. Scallions, chicken, celery, carrots, it's chock full of soup. At the end, they all enjoy this wonderful soup together. Alone, they weren't sure if they were going to make it through the night, Together, they're having a soup party. What is the recipe for this soup?
What do you have and what can you share?
What do they share with us?
What is the ethic of sharing?
What is our context for sharing?
How and who will eat the soup?
Is sharing enough?
Is knowledge experienced the new power?
Sharing is evil.
How do we define principles for sharing?
What if there's a bug in the soup?
How can you find the right frequency?
Give and take.
We need unconditional privacy.
Who is asking the questions?
How to make the soup?
What is our context for sharing? What do we have and what can we share?
Art and partial solutions.
Feedback loop. I want privacy.
What's the eventual goal of sharing?
How to make the soup?
What is our context for sharing?
What do they share with us?
How could we arrange for tolerance of errors in society?
What's the eventual goal of sharing?
How do we make a meaningful space for sharing imperfection? What is our context for sharing?
Is knowledge experience the new power?
Is sharing enough?
Can you find the right frequency?
What do they share with us? Can we have more trust?
What do they share with us?
แบ่งกันดีกว่า
What do we have and what can we share?
What can we learn from sharing imperfections?
The full factor of sharing.
How could we arrange for tolerance of errors in society?
Who decides what is shared about me?
Return on sharing.
Can we have more transparency?
Okay, well, thanks for that kind of psychedelic visual sonic soup. Yeah, fantastic, really. I mean, I think the story you said at the start sort of summed this up, this idea. We talked a lot about giving and taking, and this idea that through giving and sharing a little, you can take a lot, but how do we create the right sort of principles and things to that? And this metaphor of a soup and a recipe, I think, works really well. So I don't think we have much time left, but maybe a couple of questions.
Just a very simple question. I love that story, but did they take the stones out of the soup before? So I was worried about their teeth breaking.
They washed the stones first, but they did not take it out.
Okay.
They're cool.
So they ate the stones.
They licked them. They licked them good.
Okay.
The book was, it was a book you actually mentioned, Stone Soup by...
I don't know the author, but there's a version of it in a lot of folk tales. Like yesterday I met a Russian artist who said there's a Russian version with porridge. So I think you can find it everywhere.
Yeah, so again, we thought this soup worked quite nice because we could follow a bunch of different kind of contexts. So we thought it was quite a good metaphor. And then when a number of the people in the group were familiar with this book, it kind of set off some nice ways of thinking. Yeah. Okay. And to Hidi once again.
So thank you very much. Well, we are very excited about the outcomes of Future Innovators, and maybe you guys realize, such Ars Electronica, inspirational environment gave you really new insights. Just a moment. Just for giving you a summary of this year's creative questions from each group, from Future Humanity A and B, Future Dignity and Future Sharing. I don't need to repeat the questions because it has already explained, but these are this year's outcomes of the Future Innovators Summit. Actually, in autumn, we are planning to launch a new website of FIS under the big umbrella of Ars Electronica. So we plan to make better accessibility of the outcomes. And we are visualizing everything together to discuss at home, in your office, or even in the government. So second, accessibility is, as I spoke before, in 5 years we had 166 innovators, mentors, facilitators. It's amazing. And we would like to visualize that community, to continue to collaborate together. And the final one is we are visualizing actions towards the questions that you created. So we are planning to make a kind of blog or kind of entry forms even to collect the actions. But please let me know if you have any good answers, responses to such difficult questions. But I would say thank you very much again for your participation. Wonderful. And at the end, I'm gonna a little bit, promote the next because Future Innovators Summit is not finishing here. So next will be Tokyo, right? Yeah. So before next year's Future Innovators Summit here, but at least in Tokyo and in Linz, maybe in Australia or somewhere else, and all over the world, we are starting quite interesting activities to raise new questions, which means mission for tomorrow. So finally, I would like to invite all, innovators, facilitators, mentors on the stage because there's a photo shooting session. Please join us.